Things are coming along quite nicely here inside our document. You know what, though? You may have noticed this in the previous exercise, that I'm running out of space here at the top of my screen, the top of my canvas. So you know what I'm going to do to fix that? It's actually a very easy fix, is I'm going to grab my rectangular selection tool, and I'm just going to select everything that I have here. Grab the works there, right? Flip over to my Move tool by tapping the V key on my keyboard, and I'm just going to drag everything down just a little bit, just like that. That's it. That's all there is to it. Go ahead and deselect, Controller Command D. All right, now the next thing that I want to do is I want to grab the Mechanical Faces mouth, and I want to show you a variety of techniques here. First of all, I want to show you the lasso tools. And I'm sitting here going, okay, how the heck am I going to select this guy? This is going to be kind of tricky. Well, what I could do is I could try using the first lasso tool inside the toolbox. You can tap your L key on your keyboard if you want. And this guy really is the freehand lasso tool. So in other words, what I would do with this guy is I would literally click and drag and start drawing out a selection here. Now, as you can see, I stink at drawing with a mouse. I mean, give me a pencil and a piece of paper and I'm fine, but put a mouse in my hand and I'm pretty much useless, right? So this is really no good, okay? My selection is all messed up. I don't have a very tight edge there. That's no good. So I want to show you a much faster way, a much easier way for selecting an object like this. Before I do that, though, just a very quick point that comes to mind now that I'm seeing it on screen is, notice as soon as I let go of my mouse, Photoshop drew a perfectly straight line between the ending point, the point where I let go with my mouse, and the starting point. Okay, just a neat point of interest for you. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and deselect, Controller Command D, and this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to head into the lasso set of tools and I'm going to use the Polygonal lasso tool. Go ahead and grab this guy. Now what this guy is going to allow me to do is create a selection using straight lines. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a starting point, maybe right here. I'm just going to single click, and notice now I have this line that's attached to my cursor. So then what I'll do is I'll bring my cursor down to the next angle here inside my object, single click, and then bring this guy further down. Now again, this nut here is probably about 1/4 of an inch, maybe about 1/2 an inch thick. It's kind of a thick object. It's pretty cool. And there we go. So I've got that depth happening there across the bottom, and I'm literally just following the shape of the object all the way around. I am losing a little bit on the edge there, so maybe what I want to do is click about here and then come across. You know, you can always cheat it just a little bit and say this corner here isn't a perfectly, hard-edged corner. It's a bit rounded there, so I just added in an extra click there, and this kind of stuff. You can cheat it just a little bit as you're working your way around these objects. So there we go, and maybe I'll click once or twice around the top there, and then right across back to the starting point. Now, what's interesting to note here with the finishing of your selection is I bring my cursor back over to the starting point. I haven't single clicked yet, by the way. And notice I get this tiny little donut that appears right beside my cursor. I don't know if you can see it in there because we have a lot of rusted metal in there, but you might be able to see this on your screen a little bit better. But there's a tiny circle, a tiny donut beside my cursor indicating that I'm about to close my selection. So if I single click now, I now close the selection and I get marching ants. All right, so that's great. We now have this nut object selected, which is wonderful, but I want to get rid of the center area. How the heck am I going to get rid of that center area? Earlier, we had the washer, and we saw that we could hold down Alt and draw a circle to knock a hole, right? A circular or an elliptical hole in the object. Now, this is certainly elliptical in shape, but notice it isn't a perfectly I was going to say a perfectly straight circle, but that doesn't quite make sense. You know what I mean, right? It isn't a perfect circle or a perfect ellipse. We have some extra stuff in here, right? So it's going to be kind of tough to pull that off. Well, check this out. This is one of the coolest selection techniques that I've stumbled across inside Photoshop. We know a couple of things. We know that holding down Alt or Option subtracts from a selection. We also know that we can create selections based on shape, but we also know that we can create selections based on color. Now, this hole inside our nut is one single color. So check this out. I'm going to grab the Magic Wand tool out of the toolbox. I'm going to bring him over top of that center area, and I'm going to hold down Alt or Option. Now notice that I get the Magic Wand tool cursor with a tiny minus sign beside him, meaning that if I single click the Magic Wand tool, is going to subtract from my selection based on color. How do you like that? Isn't that cool? That's one of my favorite techniques. Very cool stuff. Okay, great. So now we have the hole knocked in our object. So now we just have the task of moving this guy over onto our face. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out, Controller Command 0. I will tap the V key on my keyboard to flip over to the Move tool. I'll grab my object and I'll drag him over. Something like this. Now I'm not quite sure where I want this guy. Let me zoom in just a little bit on my face. I'm not quite sure exactly where I want to position this guy, but maybe I'll just kind of position him towards the bottom-ish of my face. And by the way, of course, I could pop into free transform if I wanted to rotate this guy. Controller Command T on your keyboard, don't forget. And then we could rotate this guy, we could scale him, we could really do whatever the heck we want with this guy. So maybe I want to wind up with something like this. Okay, go ahead and hit Enter to lock that in, and Controller Command D to deselect.